Hey everybody, welcome back.
To the show.
The show. The show of shows.
I don't know what that means.
I don't know what that means.
I'm Jen.
I am Graham.
And what are we talking about today, Graham?
Sensory stuff. Senses and sensation.
Wow.
And look.
It sounds sensational.
There it is. There it is.
It took a minute. Sorry, I'm not like fully awake apparently, even though it's afternoon.
Yeah. It do be like that though.
What I know that you made a list of notes because you're always prepared. I was just like, let's fucking talk about this because another autistic comic kind of talked about it, and I was like, yeah, we should do that episode, man. So, what do you got? What's up?
So, sensory sensitivities and sensory differences and sensory difficulties are all pretty prominent within neurodivergent populations. And I was thinking about how sometimes, like when we started, I feel like when we started this podcast, it was largely like, how does our like mixed neurotype setup affect like relationships and everything? And then somewhere along the line, like a lot of those episodes are basically just like me talking about it. So I was thinking about how like sensory differences really do impact a relationship in a lot of ways. Maybe more so than some of the other things we've talked about. If you're fortunate enough to have really minor meltdowns or infrequent meltdowns or whatever, like those don't come up as much, but everybody hates the big light. So
I don't.
Well, that's exactly my point. But just kind of off the top, like for a lot of neurodivergent people, our kind of basic senses tend to just sort of be in overdrive a lot of the time. I don't think it's necessarily that we have sharper or like more powerful senses a lot of the times. I think it's just that we don't have the part of your brain that filters out like the noise.
I think it's hard for neurotypical people to really understand, like, yeah, like grabbing a fucking microfiber towel sucks, but like, why are you acting like a baby about it?
Yeah, there is a lot of discussion around how we have kind of like almost inverted relationships to pain and discomfort that you do. Like as a neurotypical person, for you, discomfort, you're like, this sucks, whatever. But pain, you will do something about it, or you'll have like a much more of a reaction to it. You might yell or scream or cry or something like that. Whereas for us, it kind of tends to be the other way around. Particularly autistic people tends to be the other way around, where we, there's always stories about, some autistic person who's broken a bone and just like walked into an ER and just like sat quietly until someone came to get them or whatever. But then, the same person will like freak the fuck out because there's a tag in their shirt.
Copy. Okay. So I feel like a really interesting difference.
It is. And I may be kind of oversimplifying the whole thing. I mean, everything we talk about on this podcast is me oversimplifying everything, but like,
well, I feel like that's good for people to hear, like in a, I don't know, like a real life bite-sized piece of knowledge, because like sometimes you get overwhelmed,
Mm-hmm. And yeah, there's a lot of like, I don't want to say talk, but like it's a fairly frequently discussed thing that autistic people in particular have like unusual pain thresholds or unusual pain responses. And I don't want to give the impression that we're necessarily more like reserved or controlled in our actual responses to things. I think it's just that the thresholds are different. I have a running theory. I think I've mentioned this before. I am prone to migraines, but most of my migraines aren't painful. So I don't have like the typical like, enormous pain that is associated with migraines. I have kind of a laundry list of other like neurological side effects and things. And for a long time, I thought it was just that I was like lucky and my migraines actually just didn't have pain. And nowadays I wonder if it's because I do have it, but I can't feel it until it gets above a certain threshold, to the point where it's like really, really, really bad. I don't have a ton of other good examples. I'm relatively, I don't know, fortunate. I was an unadventurous child and I never broke a bone. I've never actually had chicken pox,
That
So
one weirds me out.
yeah, it weirds me out as well, because my sister had it like more than once, I think, and
That's not supposed to be possible.
I don't know. Maybe we've established that my memory doesn't exactly function, so
Mm.
and she can correct me on that. But yeah, I mean, and my parents absolutely did the thing where like whenever a local kid had chickenpox, everybody had to go over to their house. Like, I just never got it for whatever reason. So I probably should check my like vaccine titer levels because I don't want shingles.
Yeah, that would suck.
Um,
We're so old. You get your shingles vaccines, kids.
yeah, for real, real talk. Not to bring down a lot of the tone in the room, but I have had cancer. I had stage 4 Hodgkin lymphoma, which was pretty advanced. It was all over the place. I had some scans during the initial like staging that showed that I had these like lesions or cysts or something in like all over my pelvis. So I had these basically growths of like cancerous tissue in my pelvis, in my bones. And I was aware of like a slight backache some days. Presumably that was an extraordinarily painful experience, but I wouldn't know.
Dude, that's fucking wild.
Yeah, it's pretty bizarre.
You realize, like, I'm gonna have so many follow-up questions until the end of time now, right?
I mean, that was years ago, and my hips are sore. Like, I can tell the difference between my
I mean,
bones
holes
hurt
in
and
bones don't go away unless you do something about it.
well, bone grows back. That's the whole point of.
I mean, that is wild that you're just like, it's fine.
Well,
Has anybody looked?
Yes, I've had numerous scans since then.
All right.
I mean, I was getting full body, both PET and CT scans like every 6 months for the first few years. So yeah, no, they've been keeping an eye on it, and all of the notes were always like, has recovered nicely. Everything looks typical. Nothing to worry about. So
okay, my anxiety levels are coming back down.
Chemo is also another thing where I always hear about it being like painful in and of itself, that like the treatment is painful and everything. I never had any like, I had a ton of discomfort, a bunch of like weird discomforts, and especially like on the infusion day after I would leave for the infusion that afternoon, I felt bodily weird in a way that I can't describe. I imagine that perhaps neurotypical people have a better way to explain that. But between my lack of interoception and my like weird pain threshold, it might have just been that I was in pain.
This is like blowing my mind because like I'll see you like get like crumbs or something on your hand and it's like
Mhm.
and you're walking around after chemo like I feel weird.
Yeah. I brush up against a piece of wet microfiber and my whole nervous system is like, nah.
Yeah.
So there you have it, and that's kind of the more specific example of that kind of breakdown of like we tend to experience pain differently, and I think in kind of reverse polarity, whatever, to the way that you guys would.
I cannot decipher which part of this is you just being like a dude and which part is the autism. The intersection is always like, I have no idea.
Yeah. But anyway, yeah, now that we've sucked all the fun out of the room, yeah, it's not uncommon, to hear about autistic people in particular having like zero tolerance and outsized reactions to what you would think of as minor discomforts. Again, with like migraines, they're like debilitating. For anybody who is familiar with them, they are debilitatingly painful a lot of the time. But for me, I'm just like, I can't talk right, and I feel like
you're debilitated. You're out of fucking commission. Like,
right.
Don't make it sound like you're getting a full day in.
Right, but not because of the pain. So it's kind of the other neurological effects, and that's kind of my point, right? Is that like, I get a migraine and then I'm debilitated for all of these other reasons, but not because I'm in terrible pain. Versus, I get like a headache because I haven't eaten in 7 hours or something, and I'm like, I need to die immediately. This is the worst thing that's ever happened to me. So, uneven pain responses, and for those of you who are neurotypical folks in relationships with neurodivergent people, I'm sure you've seen it.
Yeah.
General sensory to overdrive. I have a pet theory that like it comes down to kind of the way that our brains are wired differently, but like, again, I don't necessarily think that my senses are more powerful than yours are. I think it's just that my brain doesn't filter them as well. as yours does. So like you prefer to have the big light on, for example, whereas I'm like, it's too bright and it makes me uncomfortable. I don't like it,
No,
whatever.
I've said before it's a task oriented thing. Like I don't just want it on, but like I don't want to sit here in the dark and podcast, which would be the alternative.
Well, sure, and I don't mean this specific scenario, but just like if you, like literally that in general is like the amount of light that you want when you want light is bigger than mine.
Just always hard stop.
Pretty much, yeah.
Interesting.
Kitchen lights are pretty bright, but there's two of them.
I'd say that's the most powerful one in the house. Like
Yeah.
they're the same as these. They're fucking
Yeah.
intense.
So that main like light that's over the kitchen, like that one is really bright, and I tend to only turn that on if I like really need to see some like minute detail or something of what I'm doing. Otherwise, I'll just like ambient light is enough, or I'll turn on like the other kitchen light, which is much less intense. Fair. My parents always used to yell at me about how I was going to go blind because I would read in like much darker. Like they thought that like I needed more light, or like that I wasn't, I would read in much like darker conditions than they expected, and like I don't know, I can still see. Corrective eye lasers notwithstanding.
Yeah, what are you gonna do?
Really, we are, as we've established with the microfiber thing, like hypersensitive to texture a lot of the time, and that's where like the thing about like tags and shirts is a really common one. I personally love it when I get a shirt that either has the care information and the tag stuff printed somehow on the inside of the shirt, like screen printed into it.
Yeah, it's just better.
Or sometimes they have those tags that are like sewn in with like a light whip stitch or whatever, so you can just rip them out. Those are great. That's fantastic. But at this point, I don't know that I would buy something that had like a standalone like physical tag that wouldn't just come out immediately. Because then the problem is if you got to cut it, like you've got to have like super sharp scissors and you've got to like peel the seams apart and everything. Because if you just cut it across that thing, then you end up with like a ragged edge, and it's
almost worse.
It is worse, yeah, absolutely. Any kind of like very light touch sets me off.
Weird. There's like a name for that. Tentative touch. And we were specifically taught not to do that. I used to be a vet tech, and that is primal. Animals don't like it, and I've swatted your hand off of my knee when you've done it to me. Like it's another one of these things where like I don't know. You always say you're not different species, but like yeah, it's annoying. All these things you're saying, they are annoying.
Right. Touch stuff, yeah. Sounds are really hard for a lot of us. And there is a huge spectrum of like things that fall under the heading of sounds. It's not just like things are too loud. But like too loud is a thing. The character of sounds is problematic sometimes.
By character, do you mean like tone or?
No, I'm trying to think of examples because that usually makes it easier. For me, any kind of like inconsistent sound is.
I like that awful sporadic child screaming on my murder shows last night.
Oh, yeah, that was bad. Well,
that was just bad hard stop.
That's a good example actually in two different ways. So yeah, the screaming, but the sound of the screaming, like the sound of children screaming and like screeching and whatever. Like,
I mean, the sound of children hard stop, I think, is annoying.
Sure, there is a difference, I think, in the way that like a child screams or screeches or makes that sort of noise versus the way that like an adult person would do it. And whatever it is, like, they say that like we're wired to perceive children's screams differently because we're supposed to like
help.
Yeah, like yes. Jump into action or whatever. I have like the opposite reaction where I'm like, please take that child away from me.
Is this autism or we're just bad people? Like,
I mean, again, we're not a different species. So, mouth sounds, like just mouth sounds in general. These dogs drive me insane.
I'm gonna hot take. You make a fair amount of mouth sounds too.
Probably.
So how does that not register? I think this is like another like, where does it stop because it's autistic and start because it's your dude?
I don't pay attention to myself. Like I don't, I mean, there's kind of a through line in my life where like I don't
have no self-perception, so I don't exist.
Yes, like but without the joke. Yeah, no, there's a through line in my life where I don't listen to myself when I talk. I have a really distorted notion of like the size of my body and like the space that it takes up. Um, you've talked about how like I'll step out of the way when we're on a sidewalk or whatever, and like I probably step way further out of the way than I really need to
You do.
because
You step into me when a person is 9 feet away.
because like I have no perception of like the amount of space that like this corpse I'm driving takes up, you know? I was thinking the other day, I bought a pair of sweatpants that were a size medium, and I was shocked that I could like get into them at all. And like they were fairly snug for sweatpants. Like I have no perception of what the size and shape of my body is, like what my mass is, you know? Like I said, that carries through kind of to everything. Because I have functionally no interoception, I have no idea what's going on inside of my body. My therapist used to say that I was like in my head all the time, and I was like, but that's all I am. I don't understand the accusation you're making because like yeah, there is a body and I'm peripherally connected to it in the sense that I can move it around sometimes, but like it doesn't really do what I want it to, and it's not the right shape, and I have very, very little perception of myself, especially as a physical object that like makes noises sometimes, you know. So I definitely am just completely unaware of it.
Fascinating.
For the listeners, I used to have really long hair. It was like waist length and it was very thick. And one of the things that used to drive me to meltdowns on a regular basis was walking around outside and the wind blowing my hair like into my face, or if I was wearing a t-shirt, like blowing it against my arm or whatever, like my hair touching me basically in any way other than like when I expected to. So, you know, if I was like pulling it back into a ponytail, or if I was like holding it or otherwise interacting with it intentionally, you know, it was fine. But anytime my hair would like touch me because the wind had blown into it, I was like, nah. Yeah. Touch stuff is definitely a thing. Inconsistent sounds. The other really good example of that is voices. And I think voices are distracting, not like when you and I are speaking, but when we're somewhere where there's like other people around speaking, it
Or
is
just like general chatter.
Yeah, like ambient speech is intensely distracting for me. I'm sure that you've noticed we'll go out and there are times when there's like a lot of ambient noise around, and I think that I look around a lot in the way that like a cornered animal does, where I'm just like scanning everything. Because I don't have the wiring that your brain does that kind of like not mutes it, but like turns all that into kind of like just background noise. Like I'm hearing all of those conversations individually all the time, and this is, I think, one of the things that might maybe be a little bit worse for ADHD people. This is a hyper simplification, but one of the main features of ADHD is that we don't control where we put our attention. And so when you're in a situation like that, where there are a conversation happening on either side of us, I'm hearing both of those conversations, and my brain keeps like swinging back and forth wildly between the two of them. And I think sometimes that like physically I will like be like looking around and looking real jittery.
I don't think you look like that. I think you just look like completely unapproachable. That's like the feedback I've gotten from people.
Yeah, that's very fair. A lot of times I'll just be like staring into space or staring at the table or some
your phone
immobile object because I need like an anchor.
Fair.
You know.
Do the headphones you have help? Because I feel like really recently, like I've seen you use them a couple of times as opposed to like regularly.
Sort of. Part of the problem there is that I have two sets of them, and the ones that I got originally are like general purpose. They just like lower everything. And those are the ones which, when I'm wearing, you can't hear me talk because I sound loud in my own head, so I tend to talk very quietly because I can't judge my own voice against the background. And so I've had those for much longer, and I'm much more used to the way that those work, that I think my perception of the way those earplugs are going to be is that. So I think like anytime I'm going to put earplugs in, it's going to be that like general huge dampening effect, and it's annoying to be in the world with you trying to have a conversation with that because you can't hear me, and I have to like raise my voice to the point where I feel like I'm shouting in order for you to hear me at a normal level. So then I also have the other ones, the newer ones, and the newer ones are designed for having a conversation in like a loud space, basically. So it like kind of mutes everything other than voices, and I can hear your voice a lot better. I can also hear mine a lot better, which is why it's not usually so hard for you to hear me. But yeah, I forget that I have them sometimes. Um, some of it is internalized ableism about like I don't want to use disability aids, which is what they are. But a lot of times, yeah, I just forget that I have them.
A
They're
lot of times I say, "Do you want them?" And you're like, "No."
Well, yeah, because a lot of times they're not right. They need to be like right at hand. If they're like out in the car or whatever, I'm like, this is fine.
I'll just be miserable.
But yeah, so they do actually make a great deal of difference. And for anybody who's listening, they are Loop. I am not in any way like endorsed or sponsored by them or anything.
But we would accept sponsorship.
Yeah, that would be cool. But yeah, I think that they're pretty good for anybody with any kind of misophonia. I have two sets of them. I have one that are like the original ones. I don't know that they have a snappy name because I think at the time they only had one product, so they were just called like Loop earplugs. Those mute everything. They have like a 20 or 25 decibel reducing effect on everything. So in the rare event that I go to like live music, especially if it's indoors, I will use those, and I think that those make a great deal of difference. But the other ones I have are, I want to say they're called Experience, and they're like, mine are like clear plastic, but they're designed specifically for those kinds of like noisy, kind of chaotic environments where you still want to be able to hear and like understand people's voices. Honestly, a big part of it is just, yeah, like kind of an ableism thing is I'm like, there's nothing wrong with me. I don't want to have to rely on, I think that if I needed to use a mobility aid like a cane, I think a lot of times I'd be like, oh God, I'd rather just stay home. And
That makes me sad.
It sucks. And there have been times where, like you say, you'll call out, like, do you want to use your earplug? And like my bag will be sitting right there and I can get them out. It'll take 1 second or whatever. And I'm just like, no, this is okay, whatever. Because I think part of it is just that, like, there's nothing wrong with me. Like, I don't need to use,
What's crazy is like I think I can count twice that like someone's noticed them, and they've noticed them because they think they're cool looking. Like they're not ever like, oh, they're always like, oh, those are cool. Like, are those piercings or like what is that? I'm usually like, oh, they're earphones. He probably can't hear you or whatever. Just because I'm like, he's not being a dick. Just relax.
Well, there's a fun sensory side thing there where like I can't hear them anyway. Like even if I don't have my earphones in, I very often say I don't know that I'm having a conversation with someone unless I already know that I'm having a conversation with them. Like if someone just like starts speaking to me out of nowhere, I don't hear it.
Yeah, I know. Even at home sometimes.
Yeah. I mean, on the rare occasion that I'm doing something that actually like requires some kind of focus, I think that there's a really important distinction to be drawn there. Like, it's not that I hear you and I make the deliberate choice like not to respond. Or it's that like you might as well not have spoken. The sound never reaches my ears.
I know. That's why sometimes I have to ask you, are you ignoring me or did you not hear me?
Right. And I never am. There has never been a point in our relationship where I have been like, I choose not to respond to it. I think that there probably have been times, but I think that I probably literally said like, I'm not going to respond to that. So, yeah, if you speak to me and get no response, especially if I'm in public, like out in the world, there is zero chance that you can like get my attention unless like we're already making eye contact and like I know that you're there. Like you can't yell my name from somewhere. I was one time I got off the bus and I was walking home. I wasn't like wearing earphones or anything, like I wasn't otherwise distracted. And apparently someone who knew me was like following me for like a block, like yelling my name. I found out about this afterwards because my ex was like, so-and-so like saw you on the bus and was like yelling your name, followed you for like 2 blocks or whatever. And like you ignored them. And I was like, no, I didn't. I certainly did not. I had no perception at all of that. I don't hear my name spoken in the world. If I don't already know that we're talking, then like we're not. So, on the off chance that someone is listening to this and has experienced that around me, sorry, I wasn't being a dick. Yeah, I think I probably am, like you said, like incredibly unapproachable in public because most of the time I'm just overwhelmed by everything around me.
I know that by now.
There's signs everywhere and everything is lit up in neon and everything makes noise and there's so many voices and yeah, it's just like so much sensory input that like I can't filter. I think that in a way that like a neurotypical brain goes, okay, none of this is important, so I don't need it. And so it just doesn't affect y'all. For me, it's just like it's all there all the time. And Unfortunately, I have limited processing capacity, and that means that all of my inputs are already at 100%. You know what I mean? Like I can't intake anything more like meaningful because it's being drowned out by all the slop. Just like the internet.
Oh,
Mm-hmm.
sick burn, internet.
Topical.
Roasted.
Temperature is another one.
This is rough.
I have a pretty narrow band of like ambient temperature where I am comfortable. And when I say pretty narrow, it's like 20 degrees probably. Anything above 70 degrees Fahrenheit is too much for me. I start to ache. I start to feel sluggish in the way that people probably do when they're like heat strokey. Get me above maybe 85 and I'm in physical pain everywhere, and everything feels like I'm existing through jello. Like everything requires like so much more effort than it feels like it should. Heat is not ideal. Cold's not great. I find that the older that I get, I feel like I'm less bothered by cold than I used to be.
You would have this place at fucking 50 degrees if it was up to you. We had a repair guy here, and he accidentally like bumped off like the main thing on our furnace. And at one point I was just like, something is wrong. And I went and looked at our thermostat, and it's like going down, down, down. Okay, I don't think Graham's ever gonna notice. Like, I gotta say something, and we gotta like start investigating. And you're just like, it's a little chilly. I was like, I can see my breath, dude. Like,
yeah. Again, interoception, it has to be like really, really cold, I think, for me to like really notice it a lot of the time. But that band of temperatures where like I'm relatively comfortable, it kind of all feels the same to me. I don't know that I can tell the difference.
you guys, here's one of the like most adorable things about Graham.
Oh boy.
Every day when he's deciding what gonna wear out in the world, it's not just like, oh, the temperature is this, I'll get dressed. Gotta go outside, look at the sun, experience the wind on our skin, and then make those calls. As if, how many days of existing in the world have you had to like figure out what a temperature feels like?
Yeah. I have actually considered keeping like a journal.
Oh my god.
Yeah, of like I have been considering this lately, like keeping a journal and being like, okay, today I left the house and it was 45 degrees, and then it was like 60 in the afternoon, and like here's what I was wearing and here's how I felt about it, whatever, so that I have like a point of reference.
Here's the fucked up thing. Like, we live in Colorado. Like, just take all the layers that you're gonna need them every day. It doesn't fucking matter what time it is when you go outside and feel what it feels like. It's gonna change, dude.
Right. The problem there is that like layers are really uncomfortable a lot of the time. Like I've never I think that I would rather be dressed comfortably but inappropriately for the weather than dressed appropriately and uncomfortably and sensorily like meh.
I feel like the sensory is winning in that case because like you're just never gonna be comfortable.
Well, yeah, but there are different kinds of discomfort, and like I said, especially when it comes to cold, I really notice it a lot less. Like I don't know, it's there. I can register like that it is cold out or whatever, but unless I'm actively shivering or like it's possible for me to be like so underdressed that like I know that I fucked up. You know, I mean, it's like 20 degrees and I'm wearing a t-shirt and I'm like, this is not the right combination of things, you know? But yeah, no,
But there will be no tag in that fucking t-shirt.
Right. No, I've said this before. I don't understand what the numbers mean. Like, if you tell me it's 65 degrees outside, I'm like, okay, I think that means that it's pleasant, but like, I don't know if
it's not great yet. It's still a little too.
I think if you're in the sun, 65 is nice. If you're in the sun and it's not windy.
Those are very specific conditions.
Yeah. But that's exactly what I mean, right? Is that like, this is very autistic, but like, I need all the details. You know, you can't, if I'm like, hey, if I'm like, hey, what's it like outside? And you're like, oh, it's 64 degrees. I'm like, okay, yeah, but is it sunny? Is it cloudy? One of the things about living in Colorado is that the sun is not stronger here, but like we have less protection from it than people at sea level do because they have much more atmosphere in the way. So yeah, the sun is stronger. Like our UV index goes to 12 out of 10. And more often than not, all summer long, it's at like 11 or 12 all day. And so, like, I don't think this is an an autism, sensory whatever thing, but like you can feel that ionizing radiation. Like it feels different
Yeah,
than just like hot.
you feel cooked if you're out in the sun too long, for sure.
And so again, you tell me it's 64 and I'm like, okay, but is it like super sunny? Do I need to cover up, to keep from the sun? Like, is it windy, which is going to make it a lot colder? Is it
Yeah, but it's all
humid,
those
which is going to
things
make it
at
suck?
that moment. And like, I'm not a meteorologist. I don't
Right.
have your entire fucking day for you, dude.
Right, but that's kind of what I'm saying. Is that like, to a certain point, I think that I have probably given up on the notion of understanding any of it, and I'm just like, okay, I'm, at 30 degrees and below, I need a coat, and like, anything over 65 is shorts weather, and like, it makes some very, very basic definitions about that. But yeah, no, weather's a hard thing, and Jen is absolutely correct that like, yeah, if we're gonna leave the house, I got to go outside and like experience what outside is, because the numbers don't mean anything to me.
Yeah, it's fucking wild.
Yeah, it's pretty weird. But yeah, I mean, like I said, if you tell me it's 65, and I mean, again, to your own point, 65 by itself doesn't mean anything. Like, I need to know other things about it. 65 is different if we're going from the house to another like enclosed place and we're only going to be outside for a minute, or like, are we planning on being outside for a little while? Are we planning on being outside for a long time?
Okay, look, you're making your way through the world. I'm not gonna mother you about this.
Clothes, yeah. Ironically, the offhand comment that someone made that ultimately led to this episode in the first place. Yeah, a lot of us, and I am no exception, like snug fitting things, compression garments, and like leggings and like skinny jeans and things like that.
That was the thing. He was saying that he likes his clothes to be tight. And he was talking about how trash pajama pants are, and he's like, "Why don't they make tight pajama pants?" And one of the other comics who was on the show, she leaned over to me and she goes, "Should I tell him about leggings after his set?" And I was like, "Maybe."
Honestly, if I had clocked that, I might have just been like, "Let me send you a link." Like, let me send you a link to
I got his Insta. I'll send it to you.
send you a link to the leggings that I wear. All, they're not quite compression garments, but they're snug fitting, which is nice. But yeah, no, I love the feeling of that kind of stuff. I have relatively recently taken to wearing compression socks basically all the time.
Yeah, it's super hot.
Well, the fun thing, I guess, about it is that I am extremely uncomfortable with the way that I perceive my body to look, which is not necessarily the same thing as the way that it actually looks. In fact, they're unrelated in any way. So
probably any woman could relate to that.
I'm sure, yeah. And I'm like a lot of non-women, I think. Here I am in that context, I'm a nothing, and until relatively recently, I wore baggy clothes all the time. I was extremely uncomfortable with the idea of like anyone being able to perceive the general shape of me. Now I feel like I'm just old enough where I'm like, fuck it, they've got a body too. I don't care.
I can't picture you dressed in like really baggy things, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, most of my life, I used to kind of dress like Kevin Smith with those super wide shorts that he used to wear,
Oh
and like,
my god, those things that's a criminal infraction.
Yeah, if I could find pictures of myself from before my mid-30s and I was wearing something that looked fairly tight, it's because it didn't fit, not because I chose that it was like, you know what I mean? I always liked that sensation of like tight things. I always liked, compression garments, whatever, but I was like, I can't wear this where anyone would see it. Like all my jeans were like relaxed fit, and throughout high school, I used to wear a lot of those like button up like Guy Fieri shirts, those like
fucking dragon
loud
shirts.
prints. Yeah, dragons and tigers and like all that shit, but they were super baggy. And like, yeah, I got my first pair of skinnies when I was 30, I think, or maybe 29.
If I'm being honest, I feel like we probably have a very similar fashion trajectory.
Maybe.
Yeah, because like Jankos were like super popular in high school, and then after that, flare cut jeans were still like not skinny cut jeans. You had no idea what somebody was actually shaped like. And then, yeah, skinny jeans kind of changed the game.
There was a point there where I wore like boot cut jeans for a while, which in the sizes that I was getting tended to be like not skinny, but barely close fitting from like my hips to my knees. And just like randomly one day, went out and bought like a pair of skinny jeans. This would have been 2008 or 2009. So they were like kind of at their height of like hipster douchiness as far as skinnies went. But I was like, maybe I'll try that, you know? And I went and I put them on him in the dressing room and I'm like, I don't like the way this looks, but I like the way it feels. You know, and I bought them and it was my jam for a minute. And then once I started going to the gym, skinnies are a little bit more difficult for someone who is shaped the way that I am. I am muscular, but not in the way that people tend to associate that word. I don't look like a bodybuilder, all like bulging, you know, muscles and whatever, but like I'm very solid. And skinnies, anything like that is tough to find for a shape like mine. But yeah, no, really like a compression garment. I've really considered trying to get some of those like gauntlet length like arthritis gloves, not because I have arthritis or any kind of like vascular issue with my arms or hands or anything, but just because I'm like, it would be nice to feel squeezed all the time. That'd be good.
You're looking for like the clothing equivalent of Temple Grandin's like hug machine.
Yeah. So yeah, snug fitting stuff. Jewelry is another one that I think tends to be really divisive amongst neurodivergent folks. I have had phases where like I wear a lot of jewelry and then phases where I wear like nothing at all. I'm usually not a kind of person who has like one ring or one bracelet or whatever. It's either I have 12 rings on at all times and, you know, whatever else. Or Jen bought me it's called a necklet, which is like a little magnetic clasp that you can attach multiple necklaces to so that you can put them on with just this little thing.
It's the bomb, you guys.
Yeah, they're great. I have two of them. Again, not sponsored in any way, just a thing I like.
But again, we wouldn't say no.
We wouldn't say no. Yeah. Yeah, no, the necklets are really cool. They're good for people of all, you know, types and varieties and everything. But I think one of the things that's nicest for me is that if the fact that I'm wearing 7 necklaces gets to be too much for me at some point, like I can just take them off, like little snap, and they're off. You know, I don't have to pull anything over my head. I don't have to fuck around with clasps or anything.
And they don't tangle, and you don't have to like look. Just go get one, you guys.
Yeah. Also great for anybody who has fine motor control issues or issues with your hands or anything, because like if you can't fiddle around with little clasps and stuff, get somebody to do it once, attach it to this little thing, and then all you got to do is, you know. So I think they're good for those kinds of things too. But yeah, the necklet layering clasp or whatever the fuck they call it. Again, sponsorship welcome, but you know.
Yeah, I do really like it. I liked it so much. I like gifted. I've given you one. I've given my best friend one. Like they're so good.
I just bought another one recently. So yeah, there's that. And like, yeah, jewelry is a thing. Like I tend to wear a lot of jewelry, and I think this is common. I've heard that this is common for ADHD people to be sort of like maximalist in your approach to jewelry. That like I'm going to wear all the jewelry that I own. Like
just jewelry, or like in general after a certain point, because a lot of like the socials, like on the podcast's Instagram and like even mine, just because like, you know, it's always listening and we're always talking about it. A lot of the accounts that are specifically like neurodivergent content, like if it's a creator thing or if it's like geared toward that, like advertisement, very maximalist. And like I love it. Like I think it's super artistic because it is most of the time. I also like the way that like they seem to, it's coordinated better. Like if you told like a neurotypical artist, which like how many are there? I don't know. Like, hey, go make. Well, like I don't know if it's just like fucking exposure or what, but I'm like, do I relate to this too much? Like, am I maybe? And I think like that's probably more the case, but it's just like, whatever, man. Are we that different? But yeah, like the color schemes and the textures and all the stuff that goes together like so well when I see these neurodivergent accounts like putting forth like a concept or a piece or an outfit. I'm just like, that's fucking sick. So I just wonder if I'm trying to think of like, I don't know, some of the comics I know that are neurodivergent, and I'm like, their outfits suck. So I don't know if it's mutually exclusive.
I don't know that there's a distinction in this case. It's like all just stuff you're wearing. I think a lot of times it comes up in that space that's like ADHD people do this and autistic people do this, and like the kind of comparisons between the two things, you know. Some of us are deeply blessed to be both. But But yeah, I mean, if you're just ADHD and not autistic, then maybe you are more prone to wear all of your jewelry all at once. Whereas maybe if you're just autistic, maybe you probably don't wear anything at all. Like I have at this point, I have 6 rings on right now, and these, like, I sleep in them. I only take them off to wash my hands or to shower or whatever, and I'm aware of them at all times, but like they fit right, so they're like little tiny compression kind of things, um, which I think is part of why I like them, and they give me like fidget things. I can pull a ring on and off and spin around your fingers, whatever. So they kind of, if I need something like that to fidget with, to stim with, whatever, like they're just around and they're there. For me personally, some of it is like I refer to it as armor because I feel uncomfortable if I leave the house without like a bunch of jewelry on, and like it's like most of my tattoos, all my tattoos really, like they're for me. I'm not wearing jewelry so that anybody will like see it and be like, oh, I love that, or I don't. Some of these things are obviously like there are associations with them. I have one ring that's like a band with all of the like alchemical symbols for the planets on it, so somebody who knew what these were, could easily like strike up a conversation, whatever. And I'm like, that's not what it's there for. Like, I'm not wearing these to like attract conversation or anything like that. But yeah, it's
I have
primarily.
like such an opposite reaction to that. Like when people like want to talk to me about stuff, I'm like, let's be best friends. And
Right.
Graham's like, don't.
I know. Yeah, no, I played a lot of D&D for a very long time. But I would never wear like D&D branded shit out in the world because I'm like, I don't want.
That's
I
so
don't wanna
funny.
take
Like
that.
you made friends with someone because you saw theirs, though.
There is another through line in my life where the way that I feel about other people is completely separate and unrelated to the way I feel about myself. It's that thing where like everyone in the world deserves all of the grace and all of the happiness in the world, just not me. Or like
yeah, I think
everyone.
a lot of people can probably relate to that, unfortunately.
Right.
We got to stop it, you guys.
Right. Everyone in the world looks good in a crop top except me. Don't even start. But I have a bunch of pins on most of my jackets and my bags and stuff, a bunch of stickers on my water bottles and whatever. And like, I think for some people that's like an invitation, right? It's like, hey, I like this thing. Do you like this thing? Come talk to me about it. Let's be friends the way that you would.
I don't think anyone is like intentionally baiting people. I think people just sometimes genuinely are like, oh, that's cool.
Well, yeah, right. Yeah. But like, I'm happy enough to express interest in that way, but like there's like a wall, there's like a there's like a loading zone just like 3 feet from me where just keep it out there. And it sucks, and it is incredibly alienating, I think. I'm a deeply lonely person at all times, and it certainly isn't helping. I have I don't want to say my entire left leg, but most of my left leg from ankle to hip is covered in Adventure Time tattoos.
And let me tell you, people want to fucking talk about those.
Yeah, people really do. I've never. It's sort of like a polarizing response, right? It's either like the people who notice and who like know the show are like falling over themselves to talk about it.
Of course they are. We love it. We want to like.
But that's what I mean, is that like there's never like a lukewarm. It's never anyone's like, oh yeah, I saw that show, whatever. You know what I mean? It's only the people who love it, or like people have no fucking idea, which is fine. But like, again, like these are for me. I'm not hoping that anybody's going to come over, and I'm not like a dick to people, but I've also not like developed any lasting friendships out of, out of that sort of thing. So, yeah, a lot of my kind of like affiliation stuff like that is kind of for me, which again is like probably pretty alienating and not ideal, but part of it I think is that I have a really low threshold for enthusiasm, and someone who were to come up to me and be like gushing about something that we have in common or whatever, it's so much emotion and it's so much like intensity a lot of the time that I'm just like,
dare they act human?
I know, but that's my point, right? It's not that I'm like, oh, I hate that they're doing this. It's like I can't handle this. I become easily overwhelmed, and then like there's all my energy for the day gone. And now I have to just go back and lay on the couch for 7 hours and stare at the ceiling. But like, yeah, so I mean, jewelry, like things to kind of fidget with and play with, and there are more and more companies lately making fidget wearables, basically. Like, jewelry is a strong word for things that are usually made of plastic, but like, something that you can just like wear around that's kind of unobtrusive and that you can just like fuck with when you need to, which I think is cool. But yeah, I know that a lot of people hate to have jewelry on or anything that you can feel, I guess. I have trouble with like lotions and creams sometimes. I can't touch anything that is like wet in the sink or whatever. Like it's either got to dry off or I can like very gingerly pick it up like from one corner and move it into the dishwasher, things like that. But yeah, like wet things for whatever, like food stuff, anything that's going to be like sticky or
I hear that one a lot. I would be curious to know how other people deal with this in their relationships, but I've never like specifically made this connection before. But I think that particular one makes you not efficient at cleaning and makes me have to clean more.
Very likely.
Very likely.
Yeah, no, I believe it. I mean, it sucks if you put something into the sink and there's like food residue or whatever on it. I'm like, she's putting that in the dishwasher. I can't touch it. Yeah, anything that's going to be like, especially around my hands for whatever reason. Like I can't think straight when my hands feel dirty or like sticky or slimy or.
One time when we first started going out, like seriously, and you were staying over, it was very cute. You guys, Graham did the dishes after we had hung out, and the next day I was like cleaning up dinner and whatever. And I noticed that Graham was wearing cleaning gloves, and I was like, we need to wash all of those dishes again. And Graham was like, why? And I was like, those are the gloves I scrub my toilet with.
Yeah. Yeah. In my defense, they were in the kitchen, so it wasn't like I went to the bathroom.
That place was a shoebox. Like that was the only storage was under the sink.
But yeah, that was the thing. But no, I was like, you know what? I need to do something. I need to, make some kind of an effort here. So I'm just gonna strap on these.
Yeah. I mean, your heart was definitely in the right place. It was just very funny.
My previous apartment prior to moving in with Jen was also very small, and it was definitely like a budget kind of place. So it did not have a dishwasher, and yeah, I had like a set of gloves that I kept around for doing the dishes because I can't just awful. Yeah, I can't touch food that's not like very fresh. Obviously, if I've like just cooked something, then I'm going to eat it. But if it's like food that's been sitting in the sink for an hour, that's foulness that I can't, Yeah. There is some science that like leftovers do increase like histamine or something, so they actually do taste different. And if you're someone like me who's sensitive to that kind of thing, then I'm not going to eat leftovers. But like, yeah, at a certain point, food stops being food and starts being trash. And once it's crossed that line, I would not survive in the street because I wouldn't eat out of dumpsters.
Jesus Christ.
Like not because like, oh, I'm too good for this or I'm too proud of it or whatever, but I'm just like, I physically couldn't, yeah.
Wow.
So yeah, like texture and stuff. I will go to my grave angry at Neutrogena or whoever owns Neutrogena. They discontinued a lotion that was specifically like fast absorbing, and it was a really good like hydrating lotion that had no texture. Like you'd put it on and it would just immediately soak in, and I was like, oh, this is what I need in a lotion. I mean, I bought like a 6-pack of these tubes. Like, any idea how long it takes to go through 6 tubes of lotion, even here? But they discontinued that shit, and everything since then is like not the same or has like a weird like slippery kind of like, I don't know, synthetic-y, plasticky kind of a feel to it. I can't do it. Artificial sweeteners. So one of the very popular artificial sweeteners right now is a stevia derivative, and I hate because it has this really artificial, like plasticky, chemically kind of taste.
I don't know that it's bad. Everyone knows it's bad, but everybody who's trying to be on their little like diet, whatever beverage and all that shit, like they just fucking tolerate it like idiots. It's fair. Sorry if you're sugar free, but that stuff's gnar, you guys.
But yeah, so anything that's derived from stevia, there are like a number of extracts, and there are I think like 2 or 3 of them, and there's like Reb A, it's not ABC, it's like A, G, and M or something. It's like Wi-Fi standards, but
oh my god, nerd.
But yeah, so anything that uses Reb A primarily as a sweetener, I'm like, I hate the taste of this. It tastes fucking awful. And supposedly there's another one, like I think it's Reb M, that is like less like that. It's supposed to be able to like sweeten things, but without that plasticky synthetic sort of flavor, and without that like horrible lingering aftertaste. But I don't. It's more expensive, so no one uses it.
Hmm.
So what else have I got? Lotions, creams, long hair and wind. The big light. The big light
You already talked
is a
about the big
nemesis.
light.
Yeah, I did for a lot of us. With things, slimy things. Um, oh, music is a thing that comes up sometimes, and like the core of the question is, why is it that my autistic person goes outside and is immediately overwhelmed by like the sound of cars passing the street and conversations down and whatever else, but they can put earphones in and turn the volume up to 112% and they're fine.
Yeah, we talked about this when we were at dinner the other night because one of the uh, restaurant bars that we really like in town, it's like a metal bar, and it's the music is usually like so fucking loud. I think it's annoying. And we were there during a football game, and the sound was off so people could watch the game, which like doesn't make any fucking sense. Like, whatever, I don't know their situation, but I was
Sure.
like, this is weird too. I don't prefer it, but
Mhm.
it's still weird. And then grandma's like, I like when the music's all fucking loud. And I was like, what?
This was another one of those instances where I know that me acting squirrely because I'm overwhelmed has to be pretty bad for me to notice it. You know what I mean? But
Fair.
it was definitely one of those times where I was like, I'm all over the place right now. But yeah, because they had the music turned off, and so the difference comes down to a couple of things. One of them is just the choice, the agency in it. I chose to put this music on, or like I chose to come to a place where I know what the music is going to be like, and I like it meets my expectations. Whereas like random world noise is random, it's inconsistent.
Mm,
And so that inconsistency, we've always talked about, for autistics, uncertainty is hard, not knowing things is hard, and so that kind of like randomness and inconsistency in sounds, the choice, the agency in it is like a big thing. But then again, the consistency of it, like when I put on an album, I know what's going to happen. Like I know what it's going to sound like, I know what to expect. Or at the very least, like if it's something I haven't heard before, like I know the band or I know the genre, and like it's like a safe sort of exploratory kind of thing where I'm like, okay, I can pretty much predict what's going to be here. There's going to be a consistency to it.
so
Whereas
Slayer blasting at 11 in a public place, this is like a band-aid situation, right? Like, you don't have to hear everybody else.
Yeah, and particularly there in Lapoodle, because it's at that volume, it allows me to tune out all the voices and all the like sounds of people eating and and all the kind of ambient noise and whatever, and like all I hear is that. For me, and I'm pretty sure this is probably true for everyone else, it's just that it's sound that I like. It's just that it's whatever quality of it is something that I enjoy hearing, and so it doesn't have that kind of like grating quality that like a lot of random noise does.
For sure.
I feel like I see a lot of like web comics and stuff that have explicitly autistic characters who are shown wearing headphones all the time, and it's like, yeah, I mean, some of that might just be like noise canceling headphones, that they're just wearing around to kind of like dim the world because the world is fucking loud. It may be music, it might be whatever they're listening to, podcasts, audiobooks.
I feel like that's another like sexist gap in managing autism that probably exists is like it just wouldn't be safe for a woman to be wearing noise canceling headphones all the time.
Yeah.
It would really diminish your awareness of your surroundings that we just have to fucking have all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry about it, guys. That sucks.
Yeah. That's real. I mean, textures, we kind of covered this, but microfiber is one of those things that's a problem for a lot of autistic people. I don't I don't think that I hate it as much as some people that I know do until it's wet. Wet microfiber is so upsetting.
I
But
hate I hate them both. Like I said, like it's not a pleasant texture. I don't know that like you guys think that neurotypicals aren't bothered by it. Like
no, 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 no.
it's gross.
Yeah.
But like the dry texture like catches on your skin and pulls at it, and like I think that's way worse.
Yeah, that's not a great texture.
And it's weird that you prefer the wet when you don't like wet hard stop.
I was going to say it may just be that I almost never interact with microfiber when it's dry. So it might not be that I have a preference. It might just be that like I avoid it so studiously when it's, you know what I mean? That I'm like,
Man, you don't
I
clean
don't.
anything with it either, which is when I get to have the joy.
But microfiber. The other one is there's this like microfiber texture that gets used on plush toys and things. I think it's like an acrylic microfiber. I don't really know exactly what it is, but it's always billed as being like, oh, like this is the softest texture in the world or whatever. And I'm like, it feels like razor blades in my skin. I don't know. It's absolutely awful. And I don't have a good example like of a specific thing that has that, but I think a lot of times when there's like a fabric that's billed as being like incredibly soft to the touch or whatever, a lot of times it's that, and I'm like, this, I can't.
I have no idea what you're talking about. I feel like the next time, like, if we're out in the world and you spot it, I'm curious.
Yeah, I feel like I've seen it most often with stuffed animals.
Okay, I have to tell you a story real quick. I did a show and Emily Cornelius did this joke about polygamists, and I think it was like the thrust of it was something about like getting plushies or something. It was like something like that they're into. And like I laughed about it because I pictured you immediately like touching all the squishable things like whenever they're in a big pile at the store because they're cute. And I was like, ah, Graham. Well, she saw me and she was like, oh yeah, the girl in the with the green hair is laughing. And I was like, I'm not a polygamist. Not like shade if you are, but like I was just like,
I'm laughing for a different reason.
I don't need to add to my relationship.
Yeah, plushies, comfort items, squishy things.
Yeah. Anyways, I just thought it was real cute thinking of you playing with the toys at the store, and then
True.
got called out. Anyway,
harsh. That's all I got.
That's all.
That's the whole.
That whole list. That's all you got.
That's the whole thing. Yeah.
All right. Well, I don't feel surprised to learn any of those. I'll have to come up with more dry chores for you to do. Now that I understand better. See, we're learning as we go.
In real time, things are happening. Smells are often a thing. I don't find that I have any particular aversion to a lot of them, but I know that a lot of people do. Like,
I feel like I've known a ton of people like that in my life, and also like there's a lot of people who wear too much fragrance. Fucking cool it, you guys.
True. That is true. I am, in theory, a person who likes like a perfume or a fragrance or whatever, but the problem is that all the ones that I like aren't particularly pleasant smelling. Like I'm not out
Graham
here.
wants to smell like dirt, you guys. Just straight up dirt.
It's true. My very favorite scent, and I probably should order more before they discontinue it, is like dirt and leaf mold and hint of wood smoke and like
go roll around in the yard with the dogs. I don't understand.
It smells kind of like the woods in the late fall, and it's great.
It should be called serial killer.
I call it spooky dirt.
Same difference.
But yeah, it's a good one. Yeah, no, Jen is the only person that I'm ever around, so I'm like, okay, sure, like I get to smell this, and like that's nice and everything, but I also would like it if my partner weren't repulsed by me from 5 feet away.
If I can smell you from 5 feet away, you're wearing too much.
No, I know. I also understand the principle of perfume, and I do not wear enough of it that it is detectable more than immediately.
I think you've like tried on stuff where I'm like, I fucking hate that, but you do have some that I'm like, oh, that's nice. Yeah. Come here, let me smell you.
There's that one Timberline, which is like piney, that I haven't had in a while, which is weird because I have another one that's like a much more expensive kind of version of that you hate. So I don't know. Yeah. Smell. I sense that you're ready to end this episode.
Mic drop.
I don't know why I did that weird laugh noise. It's a little gross.
Yeah, I'm sure that's coming out in the edit.
Maybe I'll leave it.
We'll see. Do you have any idea what we should talk about next time? I haven't gotten any suggestions, everyone. Just saying.
All 6 of our listeners. Maybe if we release on a consistent schedule, we'd have more.
Yeah, it might help.
So that's on me. I say that as though it's your fault, but yeah, that's me.
Well, I don't know. Do you want me to pester you about it and then you'll just go into fucking, what do you call it? DOA?
Close enough.
Tell the people what it really is. I know what it is.
PDA, persistent demand avoidance.
Yeah. So
Pathological demand avoidance.
yeah, I can gently ask Graham if he wants to record and see what the answer is, or I can say, "Hey, we're doing that," and then you won't get any episodes.
It's true. I am what I am.
All right. Well, I guess we'll figure out another one. We'll see what inspires me next to gently suggest something might be fun to talk about.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Well, that's been, I don't know what that means, and now we know why Graham won't touch the counter.
Thanks for joining us. Thanks for interacting when you do, as you do. And we will go now.
Such a strong ending.
Goodbye, audience.
Goodbye.
You can find us on social media on Instagram at idkwhatthatmeans.podcast, or if you happen to be on Blue Sky, idkwhatthatmeans.bsky.social. Or you can contact us by email at idkwhatthatmeans.podcast@gmail.com.
We hope you have fun or learn something. Probably not both, but hopefully both.
Probably not both.
Anyways, thanks for listening to I Don't Know What That Means.
Thanks, y'all.
Bye.
Bye. You can find us on social media on Instagram at idkwhatthatmeans.podcast, or if you happen to be on Blue Sky, idkwhatthatmeans.bsky.social. Or you can contact us by email at idkwhatthatmeans.podcast@gmail.com.
We hope you have fun or learn something. Probably not both, but hopefully both.
Probably not both.
Anyways, thanks for listening to I Don't Know What That Means.
Thanks, y'all.
Bye.
Bye.